Hello, BNS 380. Hope you guys are doing well. I hope you guys got my email this morning or this afternoon. I don't even know. We have voted to eliminate the paper. Sorry it took me so long to come to that decision. For those of you that were already working on the paper, I guess I just realized this week that we only have 2 weeks left. And I just started thinking about all the things that we're doing in this class, and I just thought, wow, that's a lot. Especially since I know you guys have a lot of other things going on. I'm having a hard enough time keeping up with 2 classes, so I can imagine how you guys feel trying to keep up with like 4 classes. So sorry for those of you that started working on that, but I think this is for the best, and I appreciate everybody jumping on Slack and voting. I'm glad we got a full class vote on that. So if we're going to do the quiz and the exam, we have lots of information to get through. So I'm going to try and get through a few more chapters of material. So stay with me. I'm going to, fortunately, the stuff that we're going to go over now is stuff related to health. So for those of you that are pre-med or anything health related, I think this is the information that's going to be very beneficial to understanding your body and being able to understand how hormones help us function in everyday life. So this particular video, I'm going to start, I'm going to introduce homeostasis, and I'm going to talk about osmotic thirst. So that's our first course of action. So let me get my screen going here. All right, everybody good? We see my screen? All right, so here we go. We're going to do homeostasis. Do stress after this chapter of homeostasis. Okay, so first and foremost, just a little introduction to homeostasis, that it was first discovered by Claude Bernard. He was the one to first discover that that animals had the ability to maintain a constant internal environment. So the thing about homeostasis is that regardless of what is going on in our external environment, we have methods and ways with which we maintain our inner environment has a way to balance itself out. And hormones are a huge part of that. This is how our body is able to respond to external changes, right? So we have things that do go on in our environment, but no matter what's going on out here, our body is able to adjust so that our internal environment stays the same. Take temperature, for example. We have a relatively constant internal body temperature. And regardless if it's cold outside or hot outside, our body has methods with which it changes in response to the external environment so that we are able to maintain that internal temperature. So today for our first part of homeostasis, the 2 parts of homeostasis we're going to talk about with hormones are a fluid balance and energy balance. So first we're going to talk about fluid balance, and again, this particular PowerPoint is going to be on osmotic thirst. We're going to do one on hypovolemic thirst, and then we'll talk about energy balance, which of course involves eating and food and those sorts of things. So that's what we're going to attack in this particular chapter. Okay, so as I was just saying about homeostasis is that our external environment is always changing, and we need to do certain things to maintain our internal environment. So whenever our external environment is changing and our physiology is therefore adjusting to make sure that our temperature is the same, or that we have enough fluid, or that we have enough energy, there are behaviors that are involved with that. So for example, if you're sitting in your house and you're a little chilly, you might get up and go get a blanket. So this is your external environment being kind of cold. Your internal temperature might be dropping a little bit and is signaling the fact that it's a little chilly. And then your behavior would be getting up to get a blanket, or maybe crank up the thermostat or something along those methods. So that's the behavioral part of making sure that we're maintaining our internal environment. You might get the signal that you're hungry or that you're thirsty. And so you get up and go get a glass of water, or you make yourself a burrito, or whatever it might be, to maintain that internal environment. So these do have behavioral components with them. One thing that we're going to talk about when it gets into these hormones, so this is where things get real complicated with homeostasis, is that we have multiple hormones that are involved with maintaining our internal environment. As you can imagine, it's really crucial for our survival that our bodies do this. So we have lots of different things in place, and if one hormone goes down, another one is going to come back. and to help out. So there's overlapping systems here. We're going to talk today about ADH, antidiuretic hormone, as you know, is vasopressin. And so that's an example of an overlapping system that has multiple things that it does. All of us are different. Keep that in mind, that we change. Our hormone levels change as we age. We are going to talk about estrogen, and we are going to talk about testosterone and how they do play a role in everything. They play a role in energy balance. They play a role in fluid balance. So they definitely play a role in homeostasis, even though we just spend a lot of time talking about them with their role in reproduction. So these are also at play. So these hormones have multiple things that they do, and all of these systems are overlapping. So that makes hormones incredibly complex and complicated. I have this picture of pica here. This is a disorder in which people tend to eat things that they shouldn't normally eat. So there's a couple theories with pica. One is that you are actually lacking in a certain nutrient that is provided by, say, dirt or chalk or something like that. And so humans will seek out these things to try to make sure they are getting these nutrients into their bodies. Okay, so when we're thinking about homeostasis, I bring us back to the negative feedback system. All of us have our own set point. So we have our own body temperature, we have our own thirst, we have our own. Okay. All right, hang on. Keep it plugged in, please. I'm gonna have to pause this, I guess. But we all have our own set points. So this is like our thermostat. So we have our thermostat set to something, and all of us, it's different. And this is especially true when we talk about energy balance and we talk about weight. There's a theory all about, like, your body is always maintained at 150 pounds. And when you go above or below it, your body does what it takes to try and maintain and get back to that set point. So this does work just like a thermostat. Negative feedback, you have something dropping, and so a system kicks in to bring it back up, and then it'll shut off. And then if it increases, the system will kick in to bring it back down, and then it'll shut off. So it works just like a thermostat. So that is the best descriptive of thinking about homeostasis. Finally, I want to talk about how we become mobilized, and that this requires a lot of energy. So whenever you are craving something, you're needing something, you do require those behavioral components. And there's a lot of internal energy that is used in the body. Our bodies are doing this all the time. So this is a huge factor of hormones. This is the third factor when we talked about the three things that hormones do. This, of course, is a big one. So it causes us to get up. It causes us to be mobile. It causes us to behave in certain ways. It causes us to get up and go to the bathroom, to go get some food, to go get something to drink, to go grab a blanket. So this does require a huge energy load. And so this is a big, major energy suck for the body. And we need to have these detection mechanisms in place, the receptors, everything that we need to make sure that our bodies are detecting these changes and that they do mobilize us and encourage us to make these changes. Okay, I'm going to pause this for a moment because my daughter needs the laptop. And I'll be right back. Okay, so let's get into fluid balance today. Okay, so one thing to remember about our internal fluid, okay, is that this is something that we have evolved with. Whenever we came out of the sea, we brought the sea with us. So if you look at salt water, seawater, it has basically the same components as the fluid in our bodies. So we are comprised of water, we are comprised of oxygen, and we are comprised of electrolytes. Water is, of course, crucial for our survival. So when we think about our extracellular fluid, you can think about seawater, and this is basically the same thing. So it's really important that we have this balance of water and salt, basically these electrolytes in our bodies at all times. Okay. So first and foremost, I want to talk about water. This is something that we absolutely have to have for survival. It is always being lost. It is not stored anywhere. So we are always sweating, we're urinating, we're defecating. We are always losing water. So we need to be consuming it constantly or in some form in order to maintain our water balance. Females actually have a lower water concentration than males because we have a higher fat content than males. So in humans, where it says that 45 to 70%, keep it plugged in. I'm in the middle of recording. I'm sorry. I'm gonna try and hurry up. Okay. Females are on the lower end of this, around the 45 to 50%, where males are closer to like 65% water. Now, different parts of our bodies are different. Our lungs are 85% water, and our brains are actually 75% water. So it's a huge amount of water in our brains. So whenever our bodies have ran out of water, whenever we start to lose water and we're not intaking enough, then the body is going to make very specific changes in order to conserve as much water as possible until we can actually get to water and drink it. So our bodies do a lot of stuff to make sure that we are not losing too much water. Okay, so I want to talk about sodium for a minute. So let's go back to 295, right? We think about the neuron, and we think about the internal, the intracellular fluid of the neuron, and we think about the extracellular fluid in the neuron, right? So when you have the intracellular fluid in the neuron, what are the electrodes, the electrolytes, the ions that are high and higher concentration there? Are you okay out there, Joe? Did you lose your connection? Okay, so you're still on Zoom? Okay. In the internal fluid, we have higher concentration of potassium, right? And on the external fluid, in the extracellular fluid, we have higher concentrations of sodium and chloride. So this is true throughout the body. The extracellular fluid, which is comprised of interstitial fluid and blood plasma. Blood plasma is what's found in your blood vessels, and the interstitial fluid is all the rest of the fluid. This is all the fluid in between all of your cells. So this has a much higher concentration of chloride, higher concentration of sodium. So these are high concentrations of salt, essentially, in your extracellular fluid. Your intracellular fluid has a much higher percentage of potassium. So this has lower levels of sodium. And it is very important, okay? It is incredibly important that our cells maintain this same concentration. It is very important that our intracellular fluid remains higher, continues to have a higher concentration of potassium, lower concentration of sodium. And it's very important that our extracellular fluid has a higher concentration of sodium and a lower concentration of potassium. Okay, so this is, again, go back to that 295 and think about the neuron and think about the intracellular and the extracellular fluid. This is the same concept. We're just going through for the entire body. Okay, so what our kidneys do, and we're going to talk about the kidneys in a moment, I have a video to share, is the kidneys are our main source for making sure that we conserve water or release water depending on what's going on in the body. So the kidneys will use the sodium to draw in water and to maintain that water so that we do not lose it if we are needing to conserve our water. So you see here, this graph over here, this is the percentage of our fluid. In our entire body, most of our fluid is going to be intracellular, so the large majority of it is going to be found inside of our cells. And then our extracellular fluid, which again is the interstitial fluid, this is the fluid between the cells and the blood plasma. This is going to make up the remaining 33% of fluid in our bodies. Okay, so now let's think about fluid balance and the barriers that fluid has to overcome to move itself from the intra and the extracellular fluid. So remember that we have our blood vessels. So of course the blood vessel wall is the barrier between the blood plasma and the interstitial fluid, both of these being components of the extracellular fluid. And then the barrier between the intracellular and the extracellular fluid is, of course, our cell membranes. And remember that these are semi-permeable membranes. So they do not let sodium and potassium in and out. They have to flow through ion channels and through different channels in the cell that's open and close at will. However, water can flow freely in and out of the blood vessel wall, and water can flow freely back and forth in the cell membranes. So this brings me to osmosis. Hopefully you guys remember the concept of osmosis, but for those of you that don't remember, I'm going to give you a brief reminder of osmosis and how this works. So osmosis is this movement of water between the semi-permeable membrane. So it is the movement of water, say, through from the intracellular to the extracellular fluid and vice versa. I will use the term osmolality a lot. And what this means is the concentration of solutes. This is how much salt, for example, or ions are found in a concentration. And then osmoregulation is, of course, the control of this. So what happens with osmosis is you will have an amount of solutes in one particular side, whether it's in the intracellular or the extracellular, and water will move into the chamber that has a higher concentration of solutes. So water will try to equal out the amount of solute in a concentration. Okay, so in an isotonic solution, this is 9%, 0.9%. So this is saline. If you've ever used saline in an experiment or been given saline, this is isotonic saline is at 0.9%. So this is what our bodies are made up of, not about 0.9% salt. And so whenever you inject this, it has no effect because it's isotonic. That means that it's not going to cause water to be sucked out of the cells or put into the cells or anything like that. So if we have an excess of this in our bodies, say we have an increase of the isotonic solution of our extracellular fluid, what that's going to mean is that water will then be pulled out of the intracellular fluid into the extracellular fluid. If we have too much of this inside the cell, then water will be pulled into the cell, if this makes sense. So typically what happens is we will be consuming like a giant plate of chili cheese fries, and that will increase our sodium content in our extracellular fluid, which will cause our cells, the water to be pulled out of our cells, and will cause our cells to become hypotonic. It will cause our cells to be depleted of their fluid. And so when this happens, when we have this increase, it is an increase in osmolality. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about when I talk about osmotic thirst, also known as cellular dehydration. So this is whenever we do eat that giant cheeseburger, or even glucose does this too. So if we drink a soda or something like that, and we have too much sugar molecules or salt molecules in our blood, it's going to pull the water out of our cells, which is going to cause our cells to become dehydrated. So this is going to cause cellular dehydration. When this happens, this is osmotic thirst, and this is an increase in osmolality, which is an increase in the solutes in our extracellular fluid, particularly our interstitial fluid. So therefore, the cells are going to be dehydrating. So we have very specific receptors in our bodies that are found in the hypothalamus. They're found all over. And what these do is they send signals to our hypothalamus, particularly the supraoptic nucleus and the paraventricular nucleus, which will then tell our hypothalamus to start releasing vasopressin. Remember, vasopressin is going to be released from the posterior pituitary gland, right? And it's going to be released from the supraoptic nucleus and the paraventricular nucleus. This is antidiuretic hormone that's going to be released whenever the osmo receptors are being stimulated, which is whenever we have osmotic thirst. And when this is happening, we are going to signal that we are thirsty, and we are going to need to go get a drink. I want to point out some of the areas in the brain that are not protected by the blood-brain barrier. In particular, we have the area postrema and certain areas around the third ventricle. And we also have this organ. This is called the subfornical organ. You can see it highlighted here around the third ventricle. It's right here above in in the midbrain. You can see this here in the thalamus, the subfornical organ. This particular organ is also not protected by the blood-brain barrier. And this is what is stimulated when we have cellular dehydration. So osmotic thirst happens, and this particular area of the brain will become stimulated, and it will tell us to start to drink. This particular area of the brain does project directly to the supraoptic nucleus and the paraventricular nucleus of the hypothalamus, and it also has osmoreceptors itself. So this will tell the brain to start releasing antidiuretic hormone. So this is highly vascularized. Remember, we got these hormones flowing in the blood, so we need to be receiving this signal. We're going to also talk about angiotensin, which is another hormone we haven't mentioned yet, that's going to come from the blood, and we're going to talk about aldosterone as well. Okay, so ADH is the main hormone that we're talking about when we're talking about osmotic thirst, and this is what will tell our kidneys when we have cellular dehydration. It's going to tell our kidneys to start conserving water. It's going to say, wow, we don't have enough water here, we need to really constrict. So that is the signal that antidiuretic hormone is giving. So it's going to the kidneys, and it's going to tell the kidneys to hold back some water. So you're going to have a higher concentration of solutes. Your kidneys are going to start dumping solutes, but not as much water. So this is where your urine is going to be more yellow in color, because it's going to be a higher concentration of solutes and less water being released into the kidneys. So this is where the target cells are for antidiuretic hormone. The nephrons are the functional unit. This is where the nephrons are going to receive the signal and hold back the water. I have a video here. I'm going to post this video also for you guys, but this video will talk about your kidneys and what they do. I'm just going to leave this here. If you want to watch the video, you just have to pull up this particular PowerPoint, and it will talk about this. One thing I want to talk about real quick to make you think about antidiuretic hormone, and I think I've already talked about this in class, is that alcohol is a potent inhibitor of antidiuretic hormone. So whenever you're drinking alcohol, whenever all of a sudden you break the seal or you have to start peeing all the time, that is whenever you have consumed enough alcohol that your antidiuretic hormone is no longer working. So therefore, it is no longer controlling your kidneys. It's no longer saying, hey, hold back some water, hold back some water. And instead, your kidneys are just dumping the water because it's not getting the signal to hold back any water. So you're just going to start losing all that water. And that's another reason why you get really dehydrated when you're drinking, because your kidneys are just like, screw it, and it's releasing all of that water. So remember that next time you drink. And that's why it's important to be consuming a lot of water if you are consuming a lot of alcohol. Which some of you may be doing more than normal in this quarantine. Think about that with alcohol and antidiuretic hormone. Okay, so that's all for osmotic thirst. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will be posting another video about hypovolemic thirst shortly. Thank you.